Welcome to the fifth and final installment of the set of recordings on a sample of data manipulation techniques in RStudio. For this final recording, we're going to look at the last 2 points here of where we'll be filtering a data frame and converting a data frame from potentially a wide format to a long format. That's what we have actually for the data set that we have here, and it's something I would have expanded upon in the first recording. Is we have a data frame in a wide format here, and we might wish to put it into a long format. Okay, so we'll just take this in stages. So the first thing we're going to look at is filtering. Okay, so we'll come back here to this. We're on to our 9th point here, which is where we're going to be doing some filtering, or you could say subsetting. Okay, it all depends what way you want to think of it. Okay, ultimately for us to do this, we're going to be using the dplyr package. It's something I'd use on a regular basis. Okay, dplyr package. What I'm just going to do a couple of what-if scenarios. So there's no real kind of statistical analysis to this recording. This is just more how do we get our data in order or prep it for actually the statistical analysis at a later stage. So what I'm going to do say here is, what if we just wanted to create a data frame of the males? Okay, so we have a study where we've males and females. What if we just wanted to focus on the males for some particular analysis? Okay, so what we could do here is we're going to create a data frame. I'm actually going to call it males. We're going to use the filter function here. Okay, so we're going to use the filter function. You reference your original data frame, which is going to be diet. I'm going to focus on the diet, and this is where in the diet then the gender measurement, which is what we have, is going to be equal to a male. Okay, so this is where we have it. Now, this is case sensitive. That's the one thing I suppose I'd see people potentially making mistakes with here, is when they're referencing maybe a level to a factor, that is, they might necessarily type it the same way that the level is actually represented in the factor. So it is case sensitive. So if we do this here, so that's it. Everything seems to work out fine. Let's just view it. Okay, I think it's just kind of nice if we see it here, and we can see if we view this. Why did you not work? Oh, males, see that? So males, so view this, case sensitive and all that. There now we have a data frame of the males, okay? And this is where we can go off and do statistical analysis on the males if that's what of interest to us. Now we can be tailoring this as much or subsetting it as much. We could look at it again. I'm going to just say, do something else. We'll say females that are less than 55 years old, something like that, okay? So if we were to do something, we could call this data frame females. We can filter it again. When we filter it, we're filtering the original data frame. We're saying gender equals female, like that, okay? And we want two things, so and the age measurement. So we have age, as far as I know, if I just need to check back here, I think age is actually just called age, it is. So I'm going to say age is less than 55, something like that, okay? So this is where we can add in another condition if we wanted to. There's multiple ways of doing this. It all depends on really what you're interested in. That seems to be written up fine. Let's view this just to see, is everything okay? Females is what we're looking at here. And there we have it. So we have 3 females that are less than 55 years old, and we can go off and do our analysis on that then, if that's what we want, okay? Definitely, it's a function that I would use on a regular basis. Another function that I would use on a regular basis, and this is still linked with kind of the filtering subsetting, is where I might want to condense my data frame to a lesser number of variables. If you look at what we kind of did here with the males females data frame, is we kind of reduced the data frame to a lesser number of participants. That's what we kind of did here. When we focused on the males, we reduced it to 9 participants. When we focused on females that were less than 55 years old, we were reducing it to 3 participants. Now, another thing you could be interested in doing is maybe just condensing your data frame to only have the variables that you're interested in. Okay, so what I'm just going to do as an example here, just say I plan on doing an analysis later on where I'm interested in whether or not there's a difference in triglyceride levels over time with respect to gender. Okay, so do males triglyceride levels change faster than females, or whatever the case is? Okay, so I don't necessarily want to be focusing on the weight. I'm not necessarily interested in the age. Now, always keeping the ID measurement is always just something good. It's a good reference point to actually have. So what we're going to look at here is we're going to look at where we're just trying to drop the weight measurement and the age measurements. Okay, so how would we do something like that? So the function that we're going to use in this case will be select. Okay, so it's the select function. Again, it's something that I would use on a real regular basis. Okay, it's where I'm just trying to, I suppose, condense the data frame to the measurements that I'm mainly interested in for a particular type of analysis. So I want to condense the data frame down to my triglyceride measurements. So I'm going to call it trig for triglyceride. I'm going to say it's select. So we're using the select here. We're saying diet because that's our original data frame. And now anything we say after this, now these will all be our variables. So your first point mention here is your data frame. Then anything after this should be your measurements. So we're going to have ID. So this is, I'm going to do this two ways. So I'm going to say ID, then we have gender, and then what do we have? We have TG0, TG1, TG2, TG3, and TG4. That's what we have. Okay, so let's just run that. That ran fine. Let's view it. Okay, so I know we have all these views. I don't generally do this that much, but it's given that it's recording, it's kind of just good to do that. If we do that here, there, that's what we have. It's something that's nice and condensed. Okay, again, it's something that I would use on a regular basis. The one thing that I find also nice with this is when I'm condensing it, I have a chance of relabeling the variables if it's something that I'm interested in. Okay, so when we look at this, we're focusing on triglyceride measurements. This is the baseline measurement. This is after month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4. So we could relabel these as well if we wanted to. So I'm just going to take, I'll leave the original line there, and I'm just going to come down here, and I'm just going to put in different, I suppose, looking at relabeling them. So I'm actually happy enough. ID is fine. Gender is fine. I'm going to call this baseline. baseline. So TG0 is actually going to be called baseline. And then this one here is, I'm going to call it 1 month. Okay, so 1 month, something like that, equals that. Okay, so let's do this a small bit faster. So this would be 2 months. 2 months, just bring that down here, in here, and here. Okay, so you should be months. So this is where you can condense your data frame into a lesser number of variables, and you can relabel the variables if you wanted to. No, you don't have to do this. That's why I did the first line without doing it. So this should be fine here if we do that. And then if I come up and view the trig, you can see now it has all changed. Okay, so I think like definitely it's something that I would use on a real regular basis. Okay, so as I just said, I felt it would be worthwhile showing in this recording. The other thing that would be of interest that I would use on a regular basis as well, where did I put that trig one here, is it just say I kind of said, oh, I could be interested in triglyceride levels over the course of over time with respect to gender. So if I wanted to do something like that, that would be called, if I'm looking at doing a statistical test, I'd be looking at doing a between and within subjects design, which is ultimately a repeated measures ANOVA. And to do something like that in RStudio, you'll be looking at doing potentially the EZ ANOVA function. That's the function that you would look at using. To do the EZ ANOVA function, you can't have your data in a wide format. The function only works if it's in a long format. So what we actually have here is we have 5 columns of measurements that all relate to triglyceride levels. So to do the EZ ANOVA function, we'd actually have to have all those 5 columns stacked. Okay, have one column with all the numbers, essentially all the triglyceride measurements. It was one column, and then how we separate them, it would be based on gender and the time point. Okay, so if you wanted to convert it into where you have one list of numbers, that is called having it in a long format. Okay, and again, it is something that I would do regular. So this would be our 10th point here we're going to be looking at. So the 10th point is convert, we'll say, from wide to long. Okay, so we have the data in the wide format. We want to convert it to long format. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the trig example here. Okay, so I'm going to call it long. The function we're going to use here is called gather. Okay, so we're using the gather function. Now, when we use this gather function, this is part of the tidyr package. So I'm going to just load that library here, just to make sure everything's fine with that. It is. Okay, so now I'm using the gather function. So what am I looking to convert into a long format? Well, I'm looking to convert the trig data frame. Okay, so when you're converting the trig data frame, so then you've to then say when you're converting it, you're going to have different categories to enter it. Okay, so if I'm looking at here, I'm looking at baseline 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. I want to stack them. Okay, so when I stack them, those measurements on top of each other, they're going to be separated by time essentially, because baseline 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months all relate to time. So I'm actually just going to call the stacking level, I'm going to call that time. We can call it anything you want, and this is something you just kind of get comfortable with. Like for me, when I first ran this off, it was nearly just to get it working right first, and then after that I was kind of thinking, oh yeah, I don't necessarily need to call it time, it doesn't have to be time. Now here I feel it would make sense to be time, and then the other one I would call it, then what I'll do here is I'll call this triglyceride, TRIGLY. Okay, that's G CERID. I could have picked a shorter word, but anyway, we'll go with that. Now, the only thing then that you'll have to tell, so what we're doing here is we're stacking these. Okay, when we stack it, which is basically the measurements, the time points, we're calling that time, and then all the measurements, we're calling it triglyceride. Now, what you have to tell RStudio is what columns are you stacking? What columns are in the wide format that you want to actually put into a long format? So if we look at the trig here, what we can see is, well, column 3 is 4, 5, 6, and 7. So it's 3 up to 7 we want to actually stack. Now we don't have to mention column 1 or column 2, or we'll understand by default to keep track of them. Okay, so this is where it is actually quite nice. So what we're going to say here is stack column 3 to 7. Okay, we stack that, works fine, very good. Let's view this. View and say long, that's what we call it, isn't it? Yep, let's do that, and here we have it. Okay, so here, if we look, where's the trig one here? So we can see baseline, look here, it's 180, it's male A, and if you have it long, 180, baseline, male A. If you just look at maybe one more for this, you can kind of scan through it yourself later on. If you just look at the 1 month, the male, that A is 148. If we scroll down here a small bit, look, 1 month, the male whose participant A is 148, and that's where we actually have it in a long format. Again, something I know I've said no, I use this on a regular basis, but I really do. Okay, so I find that quite good. So what I really like with doing this in R is you only just have to tell RStudio what columns you're stacking. Okay, and then when you stack them, you're essentially stacking something from a wide format into 2 columns. That's what we're doing here. We had something that was 5 columns. We stacked it into 2 columns. That's what we basically did here. We stacked it into 2 columns. One of the columns is basically your category, which is ultimately your heading that you had here to your variables, and then the other is the actual measurement. Then OR takes care of whatever else you don't mention. Whatever you don't mention, it just keeps track of. Okay, so it doesn't actually lose that. Okay, which is obviously quite good, right? So that's very good. The other thing then is maybe you could have something in a long format. You might want to convert it into a wide format. I know now, again, if I was mentioning the repeated measures ANOVA, a kind of a prerequisite to doing something like a repeated measures ANOVA, I might have to do boxes test to test the overall kind of homogeneity of variances idea. And to do that boxes test in RStudio using the BioTools, well, one way of doing it is using the BioTools package. You need your data in a wide format then for that. So you might actually have your data in a long format and you need to actually convert it into a wide format. And again, I would have said this in the first recording. These would have been things that I would have been very uncomfortable with at the start when I was starting my journey in using RStudio. And ultimately what I felt was that highlighted my uncomfort, just basically highlighted my lack of confidence in using RStudio and lack of ability in using, I suppose, data manipulation. Okay, so it's to get comfortable, to be confident with doing the data manipulation techniques. Okay, so what we're going to just do here is convert, we'll say here, and this will be the last thing, convert from long to wide. Okay, so we want to basically go backwards. So I'm going to call this wide now this time. Now sometimes people find this confusing because we're chopping and changing through all different versions. Look, this is where you can kind of come back maybe to the recording if you find, look, it might be of use now, this part, but it could be of use later on. Okay, so when we're converting from long to wide, so we want to look at having a wide data frame, what we're going to use now is the spread function. We reference, so this is where we're just kind of going backwards. So we reference the data frame that we have, so we have this long data frame. And then the next thing you reference is your key, okay, which is basically your levels. Okay, so what we actually have is we have the 5 levels of baseline, 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, 4 months. So we have that. So what we call that in this case is time. It doesn't have to be called the same thing as it is up here, but that's what we will do. And then we have the triglyceride. Okay, so the next thing then will be the triglyceride, which is your measurement. Okay, so this is where you're telling is what comes in here. Actually, I'll just put in a small comment, a very brief comment here in the brackets. You'd state your data frame first. Okay, so your data frame will be the first thing, and then you'd state the key, and then you'd state your measure or your value will this be less. Okay, like that's basically the structure, and then OR will take care of everything else after that. So if we just run this guy off here, and if we view the wide like that, that should be fine. There we have it. It's gone back to its original. Now, you mightn't like the order to this. This is something that you kind of fix up yourself. And we looked at in the, I think, was it the second recording of where we looked at reordering variables, if that was something of interest. Okay, so we looked at that. Actually, it was in the second recording. But ultimately, what we're just trying to show here is how to convert from long to wide. Okay. So that's the last part to this. Okay, so that's the 10 points. And again, what we said with these 10 points is these were just a sample of data manipulation techniques. And I suppose where I came up with these 10 points is down to the, I suppose, functions or operations that I would use on a regular basis in RStudio. But that ultimately brings an end to this set of recordings on data manipulation techniques in R, more so a sample of data manipulation techniques in R. If you find these recordings of use, please like, share. You might subscribe to the channel, and you'll find some other learning resources up there that I'll be uploading over the coming weeks and months. Okay, but for now, hopefully these were of help to you, and we'll see you for the next recording. All the best.